2019 is portrayed as one of the greatest years for anime ever. I mean, in the first season of the year, we have got amazing titles for anime, such as The Promised Neverland, which is a story about hope and humanity, Dororo, which is a story about ancient fighting with cool storytelling, and then we have Mob Psycho 100 Season 2. As an anime only, to jump into season 2 of Mob Psycho 100 from season 1 is a joy, because I watched season 1 a couple of months ago, and even though it's been like nearly a year, it's one of my favorite anime series ever, and to see a continuation of that was absolutely fascinating. But the big thing is that I didn't have any expectation from season 1 jumping to season 2, because I was an anime only, and I think that season 2 used to literally become one of the greatest things I have ever seen, to literally become my favorite anime, and to literally be the greatest anime made in 2019, Mob Psycho 100 Season 2. Before getting into Season 2 itself, I was thinking that when the Season 2 comes out, I would just make a video about the appeal of Mob Psycho 100 as a series. How could I be more wrong? By the title of this video, Mob Psycho 100 is a masterpiece. As a huge fan of One Punch Man, and I know One Punch Man before Mob Psycho 100, I watched One Punch Man before Mob Psycho 100, and I like One Punch Man more than Mob Psycho 100, but after rewatching Season 1, and after finishing season 2, Mob Psycho 100 not only is superior to One Punch Man, but also at this point in time might just be my favorite anime of all time. And I have some reasons why, in specific 5 reasons why, and that's what I'm gonna use as segments for this video, to explain why Mob Psycho 100 is a masterpiece. The protagonist of Mob Psycho 100, Mob himself, has one of the greater developments to ever be seen in an anime. The difference between him and Saitama is that Saitama is fighting for a larger society, but Mob is fighting for something much inferior to that, but much superior to that, and he's fighting for himself, or better say, for his heart, his emotions, and his thoughts to better himself. They both are really overpowered characters, and they both are really similar as characters. In fact, one, the creator of both series, was probably going for something similar, but what makes Mob and Saitama different, and in my opinion what makes Mob a better protagonist, is change, development. While Saitama's greatest challenge in his world is to embrace who he is and people to like him for that, Mob's biggest challenge in his world is to change so he can like himself for that. And to me, that means more than anything a story can be about, or should be about. The interactions between Mob and his friends, the interaction between Mob and his sensei, the interaction between Mob and his brother, the goals of Mob, what he wants to achieve in his future or in his present, the way he fights for others and the way he fights for himself, the way he admires others and the way that he wants to admire his future self, the way he develops and the way he works, the way he refuses to use his biggest gift. In fact, I would even argue that his biggest gift, his psychic powers, or his biggest curse, or he tries to portray it like that, because it's not about embracing what you have, it is embracing what you are. It's not about being the best, it's about being better than who you were yesterday. And to Mob, everyone in this world is special, but at the same time, nobody is more special than the other. And that is the story of Mob Psycho 100, my favorite anime of all time. Well, that's just like a bit of the philosophy and the fraction of what the story was going for, but let's actually analyze the story. Next segment. The story of Mob Psycho 100 takes place in a form of parody. Many people will argue that that is a parody of shonen animes, especially seeing the Yu Yu Hakusho's references, and my favorite, and probably your favorite, JoJo's Bizarre Adventures Part 4 references. makes me happy and makes everyone happy. But there is more to that story. The story follows an episodic format that ties all together at the end. The episodic formats, it's usually about developing each character at the same time putting the puzzle together for the end game of the story, so aka the final episodes or the final arc. That's how the Mob Psycho 100 formula has been for the first 2 seasons at least. The story standalone might not be the best things about the series as a whole, because honestly speaking it takes such cliche elements, but what makes the story unique is the interpretation of the uniqueness of their own characterization of the characters into the story. So basically it can be taken such much like simple and really cliche elements like high school, Japanese town, an underdog story, but the characters and the bizarre nature of the world that Mob Psycho 100 has makes this story unique, because each single arc or each single episode or each single character has something more to them than what the story needs from them, and that is what Mob Psycho 100 uses as its advantage to pull every single string out from the viewer's attention, and that is why it's entertaining, and that's why the story works. There is a character in Mob Psycho 100 named Reigen. Mob is the protagonist of Mob Psycho 100, but Reigen is the second protagonist, the second lead character, the second main character. He's so good that he deserves its own segment in a video why Mob Psycho 100 is a masterpiece. Reigen takes every single element from every single badass, cool and funny character in any show you ever watched and makes that even more funny, but at the same time puts an element to it, an element that is so unique to Reigen that I'm about to call that the Reigen element. Imagine a character that doesn't have a superpower, that isn't really intelligent uniquely, that isn't really the most intelligent character in the show uniquely, that doesn't have a gift or anything specifically, and still manage to not only be the best character, but also to be the strongest, coolest, and the most intelligent character. How? That is called the Reigen element. A person that can only be good at bluffing and Photoshop skills to be as good as Reigen should be impossible for other characters that isn't Reigen. I love him. He's one of my favorite fictional characters at this point, and he's the fan favorite. I would argue he's the best written character from Mob Psycho 100, but that's just my opinion, I guess. My favorite scene from Mob Psycho 100 Season 2 is a really specific scene. Let me give you the context to that scene. So basically, there is an argument between Mob and Reigen, and Mob decides to leave Reigen for a couple of days, and since Reigen doesn't have any power, he basically gets exposed for being a fake psychist. So after a couple of interviews gone wrong, he needs to clear his name, and kinda he does. There is at least 2 episodes perhaps then Reigen and Mob don't talk to each other at all. In fact, they don't meet with each other at all, and when they do, Reigen says, "Why are you here? Didn't you hear? I'm fake." And Mob replies to him, "I knew all along." And Reigen is like, "Really?" And Mob says, "I knew all along that you're generally a good person." That scene is my favorite scene from Mob Psycho 100. Tells so much about the characters, the human side of them, and most importantly about a relationship and how to write good characters in a simple story. If Mob is the protagonist of Mob Psycho 100, then Reigen is the heart of Mob Psycho 100. A big tribute to my favorite character from Mob Psycho 100 and one of my favorite anime characters and one of my favorite fictional characters, the legend Reigen himself. Quite possibly, the best thing about this series itself is the side characters. Mob Psycho 100 follows a format that we get more side characters as the story goes along. Whenever they join Mob because they have a common interest with him, or they just are there, or even more interesting, they are antagonists turned good characters or antagonists turned protagonists, they are there. And the strings they pull together to Mob's characterization, or better say his development as a characters, are really important. And I will say, as little screen time as a character can have, they have so much impact into Mob's development. And like I explained into the story part of Mob Psycho 100, Mob's development is quite possibly the most important thing about Mob Psycho 100 story. So every single character has an importance beyond what it really does to the external part of the story, which makes for some great characterization. I really like every single minor character. They all are some of my favorite minor characters into the story, and I honestly mean this. This is something that I don't hear a lot of people say, but Mob Psycho 100 as one of the greatest cast of characters ever. Period. And quite possibly the most underrated aspect of the show is the villain aspect of the series. And this is probably because the majority of villains, aka antagonists, in Mob Psycho 100 turn out to be the good guys at the end. But besides that, there are some characters that don't just do that. And what I'm gonna focus into this part or this segment of the video is the antagonist of season 2, talking about Keiji Mogami, aka what I will argue that is Mob's biggest rival in terms of power, or quote-unquote the century's greatest psychist. He is an evil spirit when we first meet him inside a girl, and there is no villain that gets so much characterization, so much backstory in a matter of 10 minutes, and into 2 episodes that he is fully around the story, manages out of every single character in Mob Psycho 100 to that point to develop Mob so much into his emotional feels and how to accept negative feelings and how to improve himself. Internally, he is just a villain after all, and he does that more than any character can ever do, and I love him for that. I cannot stress this enough. Mob Psycho 100 villains are underrated. We need more appreciation for them. So, as a conclusion, I highly doubt that anyone watching this video so far hasn't watched Mob Psycho 100, but for some reason if you haven't, you know what to do. And for some reason if you're not completely caught up, you should do that. Mob Psycho 100 is at this point one of the greatest stories I have ever had the pleasure of watching. I'm an anime only and I'm gonna remain as one, but this might just be my favorite anime ever. I love it so much. I'm so much invested to the characters that at this point I will probably watch the next season immediately. And I don't mean that immediately, I mean I will be excited 1 week before it comes out. I will just make 200 videos just hyping it out and classic stuff. Mob Psycho 100 is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Thank you for watching. adinplore is signing out. Make sure to follow me on Twitter, join my Discord server, friend me a request on my anime list so I can accept you. Thank you for watching. Bye.